All right. Thank you, Andreas. So what I wanted to follow up with here was a little bit of a view from the ground. So what I'm going to start with is look at online sales demand across some categories. You're going to see some unsurprising things here. Food and beverage delivery, health and wellness, home learning are way up. Things like B2B, luxury goods are way down. I'm going to use the fashion category. We have a large number of clients that we work with in this category, and I think it's a bit instructive. What you'll see overall here online is, after a dip the week of March 9th, demand from March 16th onward is largely flat. Now, that's online. The story largely has been dominated by what is really going on out there. I mean, retail has fundamentally gone to zero. And so the broader story in the category is that people are down huge, 30, 40%. Now, the silver lining with this, and the thing that I think is interesting and I want to tease apart a little bit, is that, well, e-com is not making up for the loss of the retail channel. E-com demand is strong. It is flat to marginally down to marginally up, depending on how you want to look at it month on month or year on year. And I think within the category, there's actually a large amount of variation that I think is very instructive for brands of all types. So I look across a 15 brand portfolio in this category. There are three clearly distinct cohorts. There are the cohorts of brands that have pulled back on marketing spend. I mean, listen, a lot of this is common sense. Retail store closures, loss of a major sales channel. I'm going to keep my powder dry. Others are exhibiting an abundance of caution. Second cohort has largely stayed the course. They said, you know what, I'm going to stick to my marketing plan. I'm going to take increases in CPA. And then there's a third cohort that has really gone out and went all in on media, in on promotion. This is a time to get aggressive. What can I make happen in my business? And where it gets really interesting on the next slide is looking at the e-commerce demand across those three brands. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And again, this is not correlation. We see plenty of evidence that this is causing. The brands that have pulled back, that are keeping their powder dry, that are waiting for stores to reopen, their e-com demand is taking a major hit. It is 40% down year on year. Meanwhile, the brands that have stayed the course, that have largely stuck to their marketing plan, they're largely flat to mildly up year on year. And I think the most interesting result is if you look at the cohort of brands that have looked at this situation, and whether it's because they're facing an existential crisis, whether it's because they see this as an opportunity to aggressively build share, they have gone all in on media, marketing, promotions, products. These brands are out there crushing. I mean, they're up 70% year on year. They're really pushing in. They're taking e-commerce market share of wallet, et cetera. I'll give just a couple examples here. I saw a great Business Insider article talking about a couple examples like Bandier and Rhone. Again, loss of the wholesale channel, loss of a small kind of retail outlet, forced them to double down on e-com and say, I'm going to go out and I'm going to win e-com. That really sounds a lot like two brands that I work with, Johnny Was and Faraday. Johnny Was went heavy against its marketing base on promotions, on media, and on messaging and product, right? So this weekend, they put out a face mask product. Those 2 days this weekend were the largest number of orders they had seen in their history. Faraday was one of the first brands I saw go out punching and go out there trying to win e-com demand in the face of a really tough market. They went out there with promotions, which they don't normally do. They're not a big promotion brand. They went up with heavy media spend. They donated a portion of sales to COVID relief. They are seeing sales that are on par in the online business, that are on par with Q4 holiday season. I mean, it's really massive. There are brands that are out there winning. There is e-com demand if you go out and fight for it. If I think more broadly, and what I'm coming to think more and more as I see brands struggle with this, hey, do I keep my powder dry? Do I wait this out? Or do I go out there and fight? Now, how long can we wait for a return to normalcy, right? I mean, this has been a decade-long march slowly from retail to e-com. And, with every day that this goes on, the presumption that retail stores are going to open on June 1 and we're going to have a line out the door and it's going to look like Black Friday, it might be that case where you see negative sales because people show up at the store because they want to return items they couldn't return. I think right now you really have to sit down and you have to formulate a strategy for your brand to win now. In spite of what's going on, this is an opportunity, no matter how hard this struggle is and how difficult you are seeing the wholesale or the retail channels. building e-com and forcing a digital transformation in your brand and figuring out what a winning strategy for your brand is, I think is more likely to leave you in a better position than being 3 to 6 months from now and keeping your powder dry and having two underperforming channels when and how retail and wholesale bounce back. So say, hey, Nick, that's great. That's a wonderful pep talk. How do I go out and do this? I want to talk through some trends that we're seeing within specific channels. So, the first thing you want to do, keep an eye on customer demand. Your customers are going to come back first. You need to get the message right. You need to get the promotional strategy right. You need to get the marketing message right. But you should see demand recover in your customer base first. So I've got some proxies here. This is demand for PPC and PLA for branded, non-branded. What you'll see here is branded search takes the smallest, kind of shortest hit. You do see a hit here, but you start to see some recovery, and you see recovery there more quickly. This tends to be a proxy for demand in your customer base. If you look at non-brand, more upper funnel, more low intent, low awareness, this is where you're seeing harder hits. You're seeing it come back, more sketchy, different timing for brands, but there is some bounce back here. Get your customers back, build the customer demand, and then move to prospecting. Generally speaking, I'm seeing shopping take a little bit more of a hit than branded search, but it's taken a hit and it's started to bounce back. If I take a similar view on Facebook, and I think this is really interesting, if I look at the three kind of typical tactics you use, prospecting, retargeting, website custom audiences, and your customer list, you see very similar behavior. So if I start on the right with CRM, and this is my Skittles chart, I like to call it, I'm looking at cost per reach, conversion rate, and ultimately indexed cost per order. You'll see that everything is taking a hit here. The smallest hit is taken by your customer marketing. There's a hit, but those folks started to bounce back pretty quickly. Meanwhile, if you look at the cost per reach for which, customers and retargeting on Facebook, was very expensive, it has fallen precipitously. So while the volumes might be down, the actual cost per acquisition for your customer list hasn't taken a huge hit because media costs have fallen so much in this environment. Retargeting is a similar story. Initially it held up pretty well, focus on people at the bottom of the funnel. It definitely took a hit in conversion rate. You'll see it here very clearly, but it also benefited from, in this example, an almost 3x reduction in cost per reach that held cost per acquisition pretty stable here. And retargeting typically bounces back once you start refilling the upper funnel, once you start refilling prospecting. And prospecting is the one, that's the last step. Once I get my customer demand back, how do I reach out to prospects? Here I see the most variation, but I do see bounce back in the channel. When you get your message right, when you get your product right, when you get your promotion strategy right, I can see this flip on a dime. I mean, you'll see here right around the first week of April for this brand, they got this right, they got the messaging right, they got the product right, and you'll see the conversion rates bump back and actually look a lot like, pre-COVID here. And when you factor in the lower cost per reach within media, they're actually seeing some of their best results going all the way back to pre-COVID in actual cost per acquisition for prospecting. So build it back slowly, get your customers back, but then, keep your eye. When you get prospecting right, you'll see it, and you need to push in. So, one thing you want to keep an eye on here, and something that's very important, a holistic measurement framework is extremely important to understand what's going on with these daily, weekly trends. And I think that typically falls into three categories. I think you need multiple measurement approaches. You should be doing at least two of these, and maybe all three, depending on the brand. Media mix modeling is a pretty mature approach. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. It's great for strategic. Tends to be, a little bit less of a timely analysis. So I'll focus on MTA. Josh is going to talk a lot about this, pathway analysis, MTA, no matter how you're doing it. It's important that you get it right, but it's important that you understand some of the limitations and data gaps there. And that's particularly where I'll talk about experimental design, which I think is extremely important. And if it's not part of your attribution or your measurement mix, you really need to start thinking about how you build it in, especially right now. So fundamentally, what is experimental design? It's meant to address some of the gaps in MTA. Everybody is aware of this, but tracking at the user level has become really difficult in very specific places due to privacy, due to walled gardens. And because of that, there are very clear biases in how we do pathway analysis that measurement and experimental design can account for. What we fundamentally do here at a very basic level, we're splitting your audiences into test groups, into control groups. Because we're doing it at the audience level, we're not subject to user level limitations. If we do this carefully and properly at the audience level, we control for other channels, other marketing channels, other factors, addressable, non-addressable, environmental, etc. What that allows us to do is understand how different treatments, different marketing treatments, and how different groups respond to those things. And fundamentally speaking, this typically comes in 3 different types. The first is incrementality testing. This is the foundation of it. I want to split out a control group. I want to take a small portion of my audience, and I want to give them no marketing treatment and see how they respond. There will be some response to folks that you do not give marketing treatment to. If it is a customer list or a retargeting ad, it might be actually quite high. You need to compare that to the response rate from your actual campaign and marketing execution so that you can quantify what is truly being incrementally contributed in a given channel. Without that view, the amount of credit that you provide to lower funnel channels versus upper funnel channels, click-based versus view-based, can be heavily skewed depending on how you're looking at it. The second, and equally important, is scale testing. How do I sub-segment a small portion of my audience, and how do I test into that audience? How do I spend more dollars, more reach, more frequency, and how do I see what it responds? How do I draw the actual diminishing marketing returns curve and understand the best and most effective way to scale into that without just kind of continually dipping my toe in more and more and more, which it tends to be a pretty slow and ineffective process. And then the final and the most advanced is developing multi-cell tests, where you test impact across multiple marketing channels or multiple tactical executions. Now, the key here, and something that I'd be happy to kind of speak to, with follow-ups or questions, is it's very important to design these things at the channel level. The way that you design this in AdWords or Facebook looks very different. Fundamentally, if you want to test paid search, the only way to segment out an audience is to turn it off somewhere, somehow, and to see how much of that traffic goes to SEO. Meanwhile, you look at something like Facebook, and you have a lot of different options. You can geo-target, you can audience split, you can run lift tests with your partners at Facebook. This varies by channel. Getting this part right is the really kind of magical and difficult part of this, so that you can drive accurate and valuable insights. And then finally, I'll end with, sorry, just one more slide here. I'll end with this. If you are not building a culture of experimentation, I think you are going to move slower and less effective than other marketing organizations. Fundamentally, you should operate and question your basic hypotheses. Does branded search work? Is retargeting incremental? Let alone saying, hey, how much can I actually and how fast can I scale into CTV? Develop a comprehensive program and a comprehensive culture to test everything you're doing and all of your hypotheses, so that you can validate in market the effectiveness of all your different markets. And I think with that, I will hand it over to Josh, who's going to talk through MTA and pathway analysis.